meeting to order. If Commissioner Powell, if you could lead us in prayer, and Mr. Curry, if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
You desire to pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, merciful God, we thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us. Thank you for the opportunity of being here, and thank you for the honor of serving the people of Person County. And help us all to do your will in decisions made here today for the benefit of the citizens of our county. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome back Commissioner Curry. You and Gordon on the disabled list on that end.
Injured reserve.
There you go. Has anybody got anything they want to change on the agenda? Either add or delete.
Move for approval.
Motion approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. All right. Anybody signed up?
No, sir.
Nobody signed up for informal comments. Anybody got anything in the consent agenda they want to pull out and talk about?
Move for approval.
Motion made. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ms. York?
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. I am bringing back the results of the Person County Employee Salary Compression Study. You'll recall from your board retreat earlier this year, you authorized me to move forward with a study that would look at whether or not we had some salary compression issues. And in a nutshell, that means that new employees are being brought in at the same salary as our longer tenured employees. And we're looking at a way to address that issue and gain some momentum for employees to move through the salary range of their pay grade. So I am going to hand this over to Angie Warren, our HR director, who will introduce our consultants who have looked at the trends in our workforce and will speak to you about their findings. Angie?
Good morning, Commissioners. Before I introduce our consultants, I would like to provide a snapshot of some of our current challenges we're facing with recruiting. We're currently recruiting for 11 full-time positions. One position we started advertising for in December of 2018. Other positions range from January to recently this past week. We typically advertise for 2 weeks, but have had to change to open until filled due to lack of or a low number of qualified or experienced candidates. We advertise on governmentjobs.com, NCACC website, social media, and listservs for professional positions. We have to believe it is our salaries that are deterring candidates from applying, especially for candidates who have experience, because we're only bringing them in at the minimum pay because of our internal equity issues or compression with current employees. For example, a paramedic in neighboring Vance or Durham County with 5 years experience is not going to leave and come to Person County for minimum pay. We have a great benefits package which is very competitive within local government. Most of our positions are in an area of specialization, therefore requiring a specific skill set in education. Our current turnover rate is 18.5%. Limited data that we obtain is the average turnover rate is 12%. We conduct exit interviews with each person leaving, and we hear things such as another job, better opportunity, more money, internal issues, further education, and retirement. Research from the Society for HR Management suggests that replacing an employee can cost between 50 to 60% of that employee's salary, with overall costs ranging anywhere from 90 to 200%. Example, if an employee makes $60,000 per year, then it costs an average of $30,000 to $45,000 just to replace that employee, and roughly $54,000 to $120,000 in overall losses to the county. It is also our belief that we are a training ground for employees who are graduating or new to a county profession and are here to gain experience only to move to another county job for more money. We have lost several employees in social services to the state recently. Our employees are trained and then are snatched up because of experience and more money. We recently lost a soil conservationist to Durham County and a planner for a position in Georgia. And most recent, last week, we had a supervisor at DSS that went to the state. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce Mr. David Hill and Mr. Bob Carter will walk us through their findings of the compression study.
Thank you, Angie. I'm David Hill. I'm here with Bob Carter, and I was very fortunate to cross paths with this young gentleman to my left probably 20-some years ago, even though neither one of us look that old. I retired from Caldwell County 6 years ago, and I had an opportunity to work with and through and around Mr. Aycock for a number of years, and our association with the County Commissioners Association. But anyway, having said that, do I have an opportunity to advance slides?
He is bringing.
Okay.
That was, we're trying to find, I will advance it for you for now, he's bringing it.
So if you'll just give him a sign, he'll click it for you.
Okay. All right, so we were invited to come and take a look at what's known as a salary compression issue. We did, in fact, determine that you have a salary compression issue, but just some preliminary data. We gather data, we examine data, analyze it, but we view it in terms of, you can see what typically is called the bell curve, the standard or normal distribution. And in our measurement, and as I told Heidi when we first met, this is our view of the world. We take a look at any measurement with this as the backdrop. How does a workforce measure, or what is that impression of that workforce as it is measured against that? So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so then we start measuring, and we have a technical inability to draw bell curves. So what you're going to see here is a bunch of curves that look like St. Louis arches. But we first took a look at how long have your employees been working with you. And in our world of this standard deviation, a mature workforce is any workforce that has an average length of employment of 8 to 10 years. So you can see on the left side of this chart, you have an average years of employment of 9.3. So to us, that represents a mature workforce. However, that is offset by those high bars that you see on the left. You've got a quarter of your workforce that has been with you for 2 years or less. You've got approaching 45% of your workforce that has been with you for less than 5 years. So even though you've got an average length of employment of 9.3, you've got a considerable number of employees that have been with you for a very short period of time. Now, through the study, we don't know the cause of that. We don't know, if you look at those bars on that graph, if in each of the last several years you've employed that same number of employees year after year after year, and year after year after year, those bars continue to go down. We did not make any determination about why those bars are, why they look the way they do, but that just shows you that we first looked at your group as a mature workforce, which tells us, or we can make some assumptions from that, but we began with, you've got a mature workforce, but unfortunately, you've got a lot of people who've been with you a very short period of time. We then took a look at how long have your employees been in their current position. And as you can see from the slide, I don't need to go over each of those numbers, but you've got 16% have been in their current position for less than a year. 64% that have been in their current positions for less than 5 years. Okay. So then we took a look at where are your employee salaries in relation to their grades, their individual pay grades, their individual pay grade ranges, where are their salaries in relation to that. You have, each of your pay grades has a range from your hiring rate to the maximum rate of 63.2%. So if I came to work for you, I would start at the hiring rate. That's that bar on the far left side of that graph. And if I was fortunate enough to be here long enough or receive salary increases sufficient enough to get me to the maximum, that would be 63.2% greater than your hiring rate. But as you look at the bars on that graph, you can see that there are a number of employees at the hiring rate. Those are your newest employees. You can see that there's a very insignificant number of employees in the next three graphs. You then get to that tallest graph. That is every employee who came to work for you at the hiring rate and at the end of their probationary period received a 5% probationary increase. You've got 72 employees sitting there at 5% above minimum. The next three bars, you've got about almost 40 employees each who have not moved significantly further away from that highest bar. So when we look at a mature workforce, that little tiny black box right there in the very center of the graph, that represents that midpoint of the range. Based on an average length of employment of 9.3 years, we would expect to have seen more bars or higher bars closer to that center portion of that graph. So that's what salary compression looks like. Employees come to work at the hiring rate. At the completion of the probationary period, they get a 5% adjustment, and that's where they stay. So there's not a lot of movement after that highest bar in those next three bars next to it. And then there's some individualized data down there at the bottom of the screen, but the significant part of why you're looking at that graph right there is to show you where your employees are along their pay grade range. We then took a look at typically the last 10% of a workforce. In your case, that was about 37 employees, so we rounded it to 40. So when you look at the last 10% of your employees who came to work, what were the classifications that they came to work in? And you can see that deputies and EMTs are the two classifications where most of your employees are coming to work. Now again, what we did not study was the reason that you have those openings, but we can make an assumption based on Angie's earlier presentation to you that it may have something to do with pay, it may have something to do with a lot of other things, but whatever that reason is or are, those are the two classifications where you have the greatest turnover, at least at the time we took that picture. So then we took a look at where are the departments. Now on the first, or the chart before this one, you didn't see a lot of DSS classifications. Your department with the greatest turnover is DSS, and they don't have a particular classification where they have a lot of turnover. They have a lot of individual classifications where they have one person in a classification. That's why they end up on this graph as being your highest department with turnover, even though by classification they didn't have any classifications on that far left side of the previous. So anyway, what do all of those graphs tell us? Basically what I've already told you, you've got a range of 63.2%. The midpoint of that is 31 point something percent, so that's that middle of that graph. That's where we would expect to see much more higher bars. Your average employee's salary is 12.4% above the hiring rate. So after the probationary period, they get a 5% adjustment, and then you can see that there's not a lot of movement after that. your employee with the highest salary above the hiring rate has a salary that's 49.9% above the hiring rate. Your range is 63%. So the midpoint would be that 31.6. How many employees do you have who actually have salaries above your midpoint? You've got 20 of them, or 5.3%. So here, the data that we just looked at was a snapshot that we took of your workforce at the time that we began the study. You saw that there were not a lot of employees who had salaries to the right side of that highest point of your bell curve. So to us, it would make sense, well, let's take a look at reducing that range from that 63% down to maybe 50% or maybe 55%. What we would do is eliminate the hiring rate. Your entry-level salaries into government employment here would be what now is your minimum rate. So we would eliminate the hiring rate, bring employees to work at the minimum. Sheriff's deputy is a good example of that. Right now, your sheriff's deputy hiring rate's $35,000. After they complete the probationary period, they move up the 5% to the $36,800. Now, this number becomes significant in another graph or chart that we're going to take a look at in a couple of minutes. But we took a look at, well, let's make the minimum the actual starting salary. Let's take a look at reducing the range from 63% to 50%. Let's take a look at reducing it down to 55%. So those are what that range would look like if we did that. So here's the data from all of the local governments that we collected information from. And this is for deputy. That's that first entry-level classification into the sheriff's department. So we compared that to deputies in those listed other county governments as well as those municipal governments that are listed. So you can see Person County Deputy Sheriff is listed under that bold line about 3/4 of the way down. You can see that we've eliminated that hiring rate. So what we're showing there is if a deputy came to work here at the 36 rather than the 33, how does that compare to the average and the median of all those municipal governments, of all of those county governments, and all of those local governments listed above? You can see that if we establish that entry-level salary to 36, which is your current minimum, it becomes more in line with the entry-level salaries of all those other local governments. So this is just a representation of, we eliminate that hiring rate, that for the most part adjusts your minimum salary 5%, which would be that highest bar on that graph that we looked at a little while ago. But what that does is bring your sheriff's deputy classification more in line with the average and the median of your surrounding closest neighbor local governments. And then you can see under the column that's titled average, you can see what the average salary of all of your deputies is compared to the average and median salary of all of those groups above that. We took a look at a lot of benchmark classifications from this very same methodology that you're seeing on that screen right there. We found that most of your classifications, with the elimination of that hiring rate, establishing your entry-level salary at the minimum, pretty well keeps you in line with the market. So you're in good shape, according to your classifications, with the elimination of the hiring rate compared to the market. Deputy sheriff is a good example of that. Okay. All right, so then, having taken a look at all of those classifications and pretty well establishing the assumption that most of your classifications were competitive to the market with the elimination of the hiring rate, we then started taking a look at how can we start addressing salary compression. This is just a model of reducing that range from 63% to 50%, and taking a look at nothing other than how long have employees been in their current position. Because what we wanted to take a look at is how can we then start moving employees to the right side of their salary range, creating some separation between those employees who've been with you a long time and those employees who just came to work. Because as Heidi and Angie have already said, you've got a lot of employees who are coming to work, new employees, earning almost the same or nearly the same as employees who've been here for a long time. This is just the very first model that we took a look at. If I've been here 8 to 10 years, my salary should be right there in the middle. If I've been here 3 years, 5 years. So then we took that data, and here at the top of that slide are two of those bar graphs that you looked at earlier. The most significant one is the one in the upper right. Where do employees currently fall with their salary in relation to the hiring rate? And again, you can see most of your employees are sitting there with salaries 5% above minimum. If we used the methodology in the slide before this and then started moving employee salaries in accordance with time in current position, that line that's drawn there shows you what that bar would look like if we then implemented that little table of movement before this. And then you can also see what happens to those 3 bars to the right of that tallest one. All of those become very small. You go from 72 employees in that one bar down actually to fewer than 20 employees. That's because all of those employees start receiving salaries in accordance with their length of service. They begin moving to the right. They begin moving further away from the minimum. And that tallest bar is all of those employees who've been with you less than 3 years. In this methodology, those employees would not receive any increase because, again, our attempt here is to create some methodology, creating separation between employees who've been here a long time, employees who have just started work for you. Now, here's the sticker shock. How much does it cost to implement what you just saw on that chart? Well, with FICA retirement, 401k, and all those other things that are attached, it's $1.3 million. All right, so what could we do differently? All right, let's take a look at that bar graph again, that bell curve. Let's measure employees in their relationship to that market, to that center part of that graph. And if an employee has been with you that 8 to 10 year period of time, their salary should be about at that highest point, which in this compa ratio would be 1.00. So I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about compa ratio, but if they're above that center point, their salary is 1 point something. If they're below that, it's point less than the 1.00. So then how do we take that graph or that data, that methodology, implement it again to your salary or your workforce? Well, measuring it that way, it did have some effect. We're going to now go from 1.3 million down to 977. That's us looking at nothing other than market data, graphs, charts, without regard to any other factor. So, we'll stop there. That's the perfect world. Heidi asked us to come in, Angie asked us to come in, take a look at the workforce, the salaries, the salary compression issue. In our opinion, where do employee salaries need to be? In those two slides that you saw, the 1.3, the 977,000, in our opinion, is where salary employees need to be. But with that in mind, we continue working with Heidi and Angie because there are any number of other methodologies that we can use that would be less than the 1.3, that would be less than the $977,000. And we continue to look at those, we continue to talk about those and discuss those. Using that methodology, there would be some of your employees, because their current salaries are very low, who've been with you a very long period of time. Some employees would receive a very significant salary increase to move to the right side of that graph. So we took a look at, well, instead of those individual employees receiving X percent increase, what if we started capping? What if no single individual employee received greater than? So we did a lot of what ifs. What if we did this, or what if we looked at that? And that's where we are now. We're still working at, we're still looking at a lot of those different models that we could implement or we could sit down and talk about to see which one best fits Person County government. So that's the presentation. That was a very quick go-through of what we looked at, why we look at certain things, our opinion about where we think your salary should be, knowing that we've created that ceiling, but continue to work with Heidi and Angie to look at other models that could still address salary compression. It would not put employees exactly where we, in our opinion, think they should be. But some of these other models that we're looking at now would begin that process of creating that separation to address your salary compression. So I hope I haven't, as I often do, bore you with a lot of graphs and charts and numbers, but that's what we work with. We look at numbers, we look at charts and graphs and all of that boring kind of stuff. I'll be glad to answer any question that you may have, or any number of questions that you may have.
I'll just chime in that since I've been here, we've never addressed compression, but we have done a good job at looking at market to make sure that our salaries are competitive with our neighbors. And when we do a market study, we're taking a whole grade and moving the whole grade for everybody. And so that's been one way that we've helped remain competitive with our salaries, but we've not looked at the individual positions and their tenure in that position. We've looked at the pay bands, if you will, in comparison to the marketplace. So a little bit different approach, taking into effect tenure of employees in a workforce. Market studies do not do that.
If I look at if you give me the number for the percentage of what longevity pay that a long-term employee would get, based off their years, as a certain percentage of their salary,
Right.
compared to the adjustment that some of these grades would take, would it be comparable, or?
We have looked at longevity and how that could factor into some of these adjustments. That's a discussion that we continue to have.
Yes. So we do have the longevity pay program and have had that for a number of years, and that is giving employees an additional check in November, but it's not applied to their salary, right? It's a percentage of years of service. So it's not addressing that compression issue. It's appreciating that year of service that they've achieved in November.
Their salary doesn't increase by that.
It does not. It's a formula based on their salary and on
I know,
their
my
years.
question is, whatever the percentage, if I've been here 10 years, what percentage of my salary will I get in longevity? That's how it's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it's formulated, how
That's
much your
right.
payment for longevity is percentage of your salary.
That's right.
So if I look at that compared to whatever you're going to raise it for 10 years being employed by my
Yeah.
grade, is it?
We looked at that. Do you remember what we're paying in longevity? It's around
The
250,
overall county was like 270 to 280 per year.
somewhere around that, but I can pull the actual formula that's in place in the personnel policy, if that's helpful.
270 to 280, is that dollars?
That's about how much we spend per
That's
year.
not a percentage.
No.
I think like
Total
20 years is
cost.
like 5% of your salary, 20 plus, but it's lower for the years down, but I don't have the formulas with me, the percentages.
And Commissioner Jeffers, when we collect data, we collect the base salary from all these places, because some of the places do have longevity, some don't, some have other forms of employee recognition. So it becomes too detailed when we start looking at all those kinds of things, when we're looking at the total overall salary. So when we request salaries for these kinds of studies, like the police officer or the sheriff's deputy, we get from all those other local governments their base salary. without regard to any longevity or any other payment that they may receive.
So do we know how many employees will be affected given merit pay and some of these other things? So if I've gotten an increase over the last, I don't know how many years we've been doing merit pay.
6.
So maybe I'm a little bit above that, obviously that minimum or that hiring grade rate. And then you go in and we adjust this. But I'm pretty much right where I would have been anyway because I've been getting 2% every few years, or maybe 3 if I exceed. How many will it affect?
We have that data in our spreadsheets. We haven't looked at it from that standpoint yet, but that's certainly something that we can do.
Yeah, I don't know what the raw number is. There are some employees that it didn't impact as
Right.
well,
Yeah.
who were, new hires.
Heidi, how does this differ from the MAP study you did? When was that done?
So we did MAPS and we did Springstead, which are just the names of the consultants who did our market studies. And we've done a market study that we've implemented on a 3-year implementation schedule. And we just finished up the 3rd year of that market study last year, or current year.
The original MAP study, it was a mid-year contribution to that was about $800,000, and then in the budget for the next year was about 1.2.
Right, so we did a third of our workforce each year with public safety, with human services, and then with general government. And so you've just done the general government portion last year.
What year was that? Do you recall?
It was last year, current year?
No, the original going back maybe
Original was in like 2006.
06, yeah,
So
that rings a
we hadn't
bell.
had one in a long time, so that's why.
Right.
it's-
That's when we
price
started
tag is
back.
so high.
Okay.
I guess my thought leads to that was 800 plus at that point, and that's 900 again in a few
Yeah.
years.
Again, addressing a little bit different take on employee pay for your organization.
The problem with the MAP study is it takes us 3 years to implement. So by the time we're done with the last group, we're already behind again.
That's right. Any other
Anybody got any other
questions?
questions?
I mean, I understand, when I worked at Parks and Rec, I was in charge of after-school programs. The only person above me was a director. There was nowhere for me to move to see like maybe in private where you might see a promotion, so to speak. Brenda, she's the clerk to the board and the executive. There's nowhere for her to go past that. So you got to try to help those employees. I just wonder if with the merit, longevity, and things like that, how many of them really actually will see it in effect,
In our preliminary models, you will have a lot of employees who will not receive an adjustment only because they haven't been with you a very long period of time. And the purpose of our study for you this time was to address the compression, which would be the focus on those longer-serving employees. So you would have a considerable number of employees who've been with you less than 3 years who wouldn't receive any adjustment from the recommendations that we've made.
From looking at this chart, it looked like if you did away with the minimum, our salary ranges were ahead of everybody except for Durham, Orange County.
If you did away with the hiring rate and established that entry-level salary at the minimum,
Yeah.
that would better or more favorably position you to the market.
Well, if we're looking at this to try to retain employees, it seems to me like we need to at least find out what the market's paying and be competitive with that.
Yeah.
For instance,
And like
a building inspector, I'm sure he could leave Person County and go some places to make more money. And some he could go to and not make as much, probably. I don't know. But I'm just saying that, I think it's our responsibility to be competitive. And, when you get down to the individual basis, that's a question you won't ever answer. I
Yeah,
mean,
because-
if an employee's got a desire to go somewhere else, you know, a lot of times it's based on personalities
Sure.
as opposed to money. And we've run into some of that and still running into it. Everybody does. So, you know, as far as a fee schedule, I think we need to be, you know, competitive with our neighbors anyway. And I think that's maybe about as good as we can do from a salary standpoint.
So explain to me the difference in the current higher and the current minimum. So you get the minimum once you're off probation, or,
Yes.
so your suggestion would be to get rid of this current higher and just go straight to the
Just
current
straight to
minimum.
the minimum, yeah. Which is a 5% increase over the hiring rate.
All right, but that kind of sets in motion your beginners making more than your existing employees.
Right, and so the compression study with making that movement makes an adjustment for those longer tenured employees to move up in that salary grade as well. That's where your cost is coming in, making those adjustments to move those employees further along in their grade.
All right, now the figures you just showed us, does that take into consideration the increase in what they would make?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, that number is significantly high because of the explanation you just gave. If that entry-level salary now becomes your current minimum, then new employees are going to come to work at that number, not the hiring rate. So then, could they come to work at the same salary as somebody who just came off of probation now? They will. So there's why then we took a look at that methodology that we did. How can we take that group of employees and start adjusting their salaries based on their length of employment with the county, their length of employment in their current position, and where could their salaries be, or where should their salaries be, with the focus of separating their salaries from those new employees.
Well, I think the market itself is telling us that we are not paying our EMS people enough, simply because we can't keep them.
Right.
And so, you know, we don't need a chart to tell us we've got a problem there. But with that in mind, you take that and compare it to the other departments, and you probably see some similarities there, but that one just happens to be the one that hits you in the face the most right
Yeah.
now.
That's right.
And so,
What are you talking about it costing? If we did away with the hiring grade to the minimum, what would the total cost be?
The total cost on just eliminating the hiring rate was the 1.3.
Is that in addition to what it costs now, or is it?
That's a
is that
new
a
cost.
1.3 increase?
I thought the
I'm
1.3
sorry,
was getting us
1.3
into a
million.
50% range, and the 977 was getting us to a 55% range, but that was including moving everybody.
And both of them eliminated the hiring rate.
Yes.
But he's asking, if you just eliminated the hiring rate, how much would it cost?
I'll have to go back and look at the numbers, but I think it's less than $10,000 if you just eliminated the hiring rate. But what that would do is take a brand-new employee today, even before their probation is over, and moving their salary from the hiring rate to the minimum.
what is the probation period?
9 months?
6 months.
It's a
6
6-month period that the supervisor uses to evaluate the employee's performance. If for a department head, it's a 9-month.
9 for all employees, 12 for department.
I always
That sounds
forget.
like-
I'm sorry, we've made an adjustment since I've been here. So it's a 9-month period for employees and 12 months for department heads. So after they have had a successful probationary period, they automatically get a 5% increase from their hiring rate.
What is your turnover rate for employees on probationary periods?
Do you have that number,
What was
Angie?
what was your question? I couldn't hear.
Turnover rate on probationary employees? I don't have that data handy. We can certainly look at that and get back to y'all.
Well, our problem is we're a small county, and our other problem is we're beside too many big counties.
I mean, that's what we see at
that's a
DSS.
challenge.
They can go to Durham, they can go to Orange County, or they can go to Raleigh and work for the state. And for that extra money, they don't mind commuting.
That is true. And one of the most expensive things an organization can experience is a high turnover rate. So this 18% turnover rate is concerning and is costly.
Same thing with schools in this county.
Any
For the
organization.
Same reason that Mr. Jeffers just stated.
Yeah,
And the percentage is about the same.
yep,
The reasons are the same.
Yep.
So I don't see a lot of difference there.
that's right. Gotta
I
take
will
care
say
of
from
everyone.
a private sector view, seeing very high turnover rates as well, especially with a economy that is booming and more opportunity as well.
Right. Yeah, there definitely is a correlation with the economic conditions and the turnover rate. Anything else? Okay.
Y'all, is this a work in progress?
It's a work in progress.
We'll talk about this again.
Yes, yes. We're going to continue looking at some options and try to fit in a recommendation into the upcoming budget. Looking today to get any feedback from you all in terms of what you'd like to see for our organization and what sort of price tag you're comfortable with.
Well, I think the best way to answer that is like he's been doing, come back with some what ifs.
That's where we're at.
Okay. You know,
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. York, you got next item also?
I do. Commissioners, I am bringing back your capital improvement plan that I proposed at your last meeting. Today, we're asking for adoption of that plan. And what that means is that you would commit to the funding of the upcoming fiscal year 1920 for those projects slated to be funded in that year. So although this is a 5-year plan, you commit to the funding on an annual basis. And at the last discussion of this item, you did have a couple of questions related to some of the PCC, the community colleges projects. And so I did send out an email Friday evening from Dr. Senegal, who is not able to be here today. But she did attempt to answer or explain a little further about the feasibility study that's proposed in next year's budget at a price tag of, I think, around $54,000. The CIP document, your projects begin on that grid, with that grid on pages 12. It starts on page 12 and goes through page 15. And that covers your projects for the county, it covers the community college, and of course the schools for next year. I hadn't received any specific questions over the last week or so from you all. Are there anything specific that we can provide some further information on for you today?
All right, now this doesn't address the recent school audit. This is just
That's
normal.
correct. So this is sort of a minimum maintenance of effort, if you will, for the school needs. There's some ADA projects, there's some painting, but it does not
This is stuff
tackle.
we'd have done
That's right.
even if you didn't have the audit.
That's right. So we're working with the schools and with the financial advisors to come up with a longer-term plan to implement some of those audit findings for the school facilities. And we'll be bringing those back in various scenarios over the next fiscal year with funding to come the following year for those projects.
All right, we got a motion?
Discussion. Are we,
Yes.
now, I'm not against the PCC feasibility study. My question is, why would we, are we going to commit to doing some type of funding toward it? If not, why are we going to spend the money to get us numbers if we're not going to build it for 10 years from now?
Kind of getting the cart before the horse a little bit.
That's an NC for RPO, I guess.
I understand the reasoning that Dr. Senegal gave, and
Sure.
I know we're trying to go with some of these things, but if we don't have the commitment from this board of funding some of it, I don't see why we should go get construction costs and all that stuff now if we're not going to commit to doing anything
Right.
while that information will be relevant.
So the RFP for construction costs would come the following year. This is simply a study to identify the needs and figure out what options they would have. She talked about needing to bring their labs and equipment up to speed as sort of a first step. So I might anticipate that after this study was conducted, that we would see a follow-up request to start implementing this gradually without having to bite off that $33 million project.
So would this be similar to what the schools did? She's just going to look at everything? Or concentration on this STEM building? I mean, that's what I took it as.
Yeah. Do you, please, Sybil.
The feasibility study that's in your CIP is really focused just on the STEM facility. If you recall, I think it was 2 years ago, yes, we gave them funding to do what the schools have done, which is a facility assessment of their existing facility. And they have spent half of that, I think it was $50,000, and done some of that assessment, and they're going to spend the remaining 25, now to do an additional facility assessment. So those are two separate studies.
I think it's a valid request. Going forward, looking at economic development and looking into the future, just like a study you just did on salaries, you get a perspective that you don't see otherwise. And I sort of know where she's headed with that, and I think it's a very valid point. If we're going to have the skilled workers that we need in the future, we need that study to move forward with funding needs, and I think we should support it.
Even the discussion that we're having with the schools right now on renovations, any type of construction, I mean, aren't they looking at partnering with PCC on some of these things that we're looking at doing? So couldn't this be tied into some of that? I mean, why would we pull it out separate if we know we're going to bite off a pretty big chunk with the schools that could possibly partner with some type of programming that this will provide?
Well, the schools would be a feeder program for PCC. It's just an advanced. I mean, it's moving on up the ladder with advanced technology and the type of jobs that we need. And the skills along those lines just aren't up to par there. But at the high school level, the instruction is certainly going to be at a different level, so to speak. And their programs should align and be progressive for the students and for the skills of the workers. So I just see a succession of one system into the next to develop some high-skilled workers.
This board got behind the STEM program a few years ago, then it turned very quickly into an early college. And then we hadn't heard anything else about STEM until it showed up in this capital improvement plan. So that's why I want just us to have some direction or understanding of where we want to go before we start spending money on it and not knowing if it's going to come to fruition. Or will the course change within another year again, like it did when we talked about STEM before, then it turned up into being an early college.
How much is her total request for this?
The actual study is, I saw it on here, let me grab it
57,
again.
something like that.
54,000. It's on page 14. It's their
That's what I was looking at, and I
third
didn't know
item
whether that
down.
was right.
The proposed structure is about $33 million
Yeah,
for the facility.
if they do a separate facility. But she said she's also assessing the cost of renovating existing campus spaces.
Here's a study. Kids would go and we could use it. Can we afford to build it right now? That's my question. I'm not against the project. Like I said, this board was behind a STEM project a few years ago. I don't think we need a feasibility study to tell us that it would go great in Person County. But if, given some of the costs that we're hearing about what we got to do with our secondary schools, I just don't know if we can bite this off right now. And if we can't bite it off, why are we spending $54,000 to tell us that we could use it and it'd be great?
Is it not a study for the future? I mean, it's,
And is this 54,000, is it possible that this would help adjust the amount that they're talking about asking for? Is this what they're looking at? Is it, or is this?
Are you asking about the schools? Would it adjust what the?
54,000 she wants for PCC.
Yes.
Okay, how many million are they talking about they're going to have down the road?
If they were to build a separate facility, which is what they had proposed, and we backed out, that price tag was $33 million.
Okay, now, is this 54,000 looking at whether that's feasible or whether they need to go another route?
It's looking at whether, it's looking at both. It's looking at whether or not that's.
So the 54,000 could save us part of the 31 million, is that what you're telling me?
That's what I'm telling you. According to her email, assess the cost effectiveness of renovating existing campus spaces spread out over 4 different buildings in which some of this training is currently offered versus new construction.
Okay, and that figure, you don't have any idea what that figure would be, but it would be less than 31 million.
Yes, the $33 million that they submitted, it's on page 11, that was for included purchasing of land for a new facility along with construction of the STEM building.
But if they did the renovations, they wouldn't have to purchase new land.
Correct.
So what she's taking this 54,000 for is to decide
Yes.
which way to go.
That's correct. We
So
pushed
could
out the
spend
33
31
million.
plus the 54,000, or we could spend 10 million plus the 54,000.
Correct.
Because the 54,000 showed us which way to go.
Correct.
So I'm understanding that right.
You are.
Well, it almost looks like to me that you need to spend the 54,000 to see which way you need to go if that's the case.
Right.
I hear what Mr. Jeffers is saying. I got it, but I also know that we're going to have to do something with them, with the schools and the community college.
Right. That's right. So the findings of the feasibility study would generate
determine
their
which way we go with
request
that.
for the following year. Correct.
My opinion is this board should be concentrated on what we got to do with secondary education, with construction and buildings, and our kids are in almost 70-year-old schools, 60-year-old schools. I mean, I understand what we want to do over there. I can understand that this study might drop the price tag from 30 million to 10 million. The question still stands, are you going to spend 10 million?
How much of that 10 million comes from the state? You have no idea.
We have no idea at this point.
Same way with the public schools.
In my opinion, the need for a consultant is to try to get an answer to something that you can't figure out for yourself. And I don't particularly like hiring consultants. I guess the bottom line is, are we smart enough to figure it out ourselves, or we need somebody to help us? And I don't know that I know the answer to that. But that's the decision we got to make. All right, I'll entertain a motion, up or down, sideways, whichever way you want to go.
move for approval.
All right, we have a motion to approve the capital improvement plan as presented. Any more discussion?
Does that include the 54,000 for the, are we voting on that
Yes, it
separate?
does. The motion right now is to approve as recommended, which commits you to $6.374 million of funding in the upcoming budget.
Where is that coming from?
You have to look at the revenue Page 12 lays out where that money comes from. You have 4.7 coming from general fund. You have a CIP project fund balance of $360,000. You have some airport projects that we're putting towards that executive hangar of $1.3 million.
So you got it covered.
What's that city permitting fee? What is that? They pay it, we did something for them and they're paying us back?
That is a project for the county and the city to provide new permitting software, and the city is paying
That's their part.
a portion
I got
of
you.
that, yeah. $22,625.
I just saw something, I saw it yesterday reading this, but the Viper radio units.
Yes, sir.
Is that something new, or is that part of an ongoing?
The Viper radio units are in the current year projects. That's in your fiscal year 18-19. That was part of the financing.
This is carryover from,
No,
It's just the way the chart
That's a
just showed it
complete
last year and
project.
this year.
yeah, well, that's what I mean.
that was part of your communication project that you financed for upgrading the radios for your public safety entities.
All right, any more questions? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Teague?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm just going to introduce this item quickly for you, and our Inspections Director, Dale Tillman's going to do the rest. I just wanted to kind of prep this for you. We do not normally budget for abandoned structure removal. This is an ordinance you all adopted some years ago. So we don't normally budget for this because Dale and his staff do such a good job of managing these situations. Most of the time, they're able to reconcile the issue directly with the property owner. But in this situation, we're not. And the other reason that we don't, so we don't budget for it because it so rarely comes to this. And the other reason is because we like to make you aware of these issues. So this gives us an opportunity to come to you and request funds to do some studies to see how much that disposal or removal cost is going to be. So Dale is going to give you some details about this, but the request is to go ahead and fund these studies and the removal cost, and there's funding in your contingency to do so. So we hopefully you will make a decision and let us know on that today, and I'll let Dale fill in on the
This
details.
will create a lien against the property owner.
That's correct.
Yes, and he will tell you all about it.
This property is 109 Oxford Road, used to be Roxborough Auto Body Shop years and years ago. It's been dilapidated all of my life, as far as I know. It's been down a while. We've got a citizen complaint from the neighbor, and we've been working on it actually since 2017. To start with, we got a little cooperation out of the owner, and we thought he was going to take care of this on his own, but since he's stopped receiving phone calls and emails, not emails, but certified mail and stuff, he won't answer us back. I understand from the tax department they're already having to garnish his wages to get their money out of him as well. But what we need the money for now is to do, we've got to do a title of opinion according to general statutes to make sure that he is the only property owner. Once we have that title of opinion, we will do asbestos testing on the building, see if there's any asbestos in it, and that's what the money is needed for right now. Once we have that part done, we would have to come back to you for the money to tear it down, and this will go against, the money will be recouped by lien on his taxes. But the request was for $1,200.
Plus the removal cost, which we don't
Right.
know at this time.
And we don't know the removal cost at this time. The title of opinion is normally $500 to $600 by a lawyer. He goes around and investigates to make sure that this is the only person that has ties to the property, to make sure that we're notifying the right people, so that we don't get in trouble by the general statutes. The asbestos testing is normally another $500 to $600. We don't have this money in the budget. Like Sybil said, a few years ago, we gave that money back because it was sitting there and not being used. We had managed to this point to have the homeowners' cooperation, and they would get a private company to tear it down, and we hadn't had to go this route. But with this one, with no more cooperation out of him, we've got to proceed, so.
If you remember our last meeting, there was a lady in the audience that asked to speak with me outside, and she had a petition concerning this property, and that's why I got her in touch with Civil. So I move for approval.
Okay, any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Reeves.
Morning. In your packets today, you have 2 citizen applications that's interested in fulfilling vacancies that are currently vacant on these 2 committees. For the Industrial Facilities and Pollution Control Financing Authority, Mr. Kenneth Perry has requested appointment. This authority meets very infrequently. In fact, we haven't met, this group has not met since 2010, whereby Certainty did a bonding financing. Currently, there are 7 seats on this board, and with the upcoming 2 June term expirations, we're going to have like 5 seats vacant. Which we do a recruitment effort every time we place an ad in the paper or our website, but it's been hard to recruit folks for this committee because they meet very infrequently, so it's only on an as-needed basis. So it has proven to be difficult to keep this committee full. Should we have another financing or bonding issue we would have to certainly recruit to have those in place. But at this time, I have Mr. Perry, who is interested in serving in one of those seats, if y'all deem appropriate. And then also on the Person Area Transportation Advisory Board, there was a position designated for the Rural Planning Organization Director or designee. And so Ms. Diane Cox has agreed to serve in that seat.
Who was previously in that position for? Who was previously in that position?
For the RPO?
Or for the RPO?
This is a new position on that committee that's been designated by the state.
Move for approval.
Any more discussion? All in favor? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Tate.
Right. So this is a work session item about your... Is it? Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Okay. This is a work session item continuing from the previous 2 work sessions that we've had about your strategic plan. There's a document before you that has the notes that I typed up from our previous discussion about the strategic plan. We kind of ran out of time at the last meeting before we had to move on to other business, and we didn't get a chance to talk about the quality of life programs. So I'd like to suggest we focus on that this morning, and I also have Russell here. He's available to speak about our discussion about a school tax. So he's here to provide any answers to any of your questions that you might have about that. So we can start with the quality of life programs. If you look at the bottom of your page, you'll see there's a list, and I asked the library and Parks and Rec to provide some input on quality of life projects, just to, get us started, just so you could have something to give feedback about. I know it's hard to generate ideas if you on the fly, so I just wanted to provide that list to you. So if you want to go through those items and just, let me know what you think. I can read them out to you if you'd like and remind you. Some of them we talked about at your meetings. One was implementing a litter collection program, talking about billboard regulations, solid waste study funding. Then the rest of the list was provided primarily by Parks and Rec, providing an after-school program, working with TDA and Uptown Roxbury Group. That was something that you all had mentioned at your previous meetings. A splash pad park, a dog park, a skate and bike park, rails to trails, a family bike pump track a multi-purpose lab with playscapes, and ropes course. Those are, again, all ideas from Parks and Rec, primarily for quality of life initiatives. Any feedback or thoughts on those?
Some of those we hadn't seen before,
Yes.
hadn't heard before.
Again, I just wanted to provide something for y'all to, if you don't like them, then that, we'll mark them off. It's just, I know it's hard to generate ideas when you're sitting up here, so it's easier to react, I think.
Well, since the school's gonna be probably the biggest ticket item on here, can we get Russell to
Sure.
kind of give us a little education
Absolutely.
on where to,
Yep.
how and how the school tax might work if we elect to go that way?
I get to be first, huh?
So you can go back to work.
Well, I thought it was working, thank you. School tax actually is very different than the fire tax you just put in place. It's actually governed by 115C-511, and this one is done by vote. So the local school board would ask the commissioners to put it up for vote, and then if that vote did pass by vote by the citizens, then each year the county would be submitted a proposal from the school saying this is the tax we'd like to levy, and then the county commissioners get to decide if they want to levy that as presented or at a different number. Your vote could have in there a stipulation of the maximum school tax there could be. It doesn't have to have that, but it could. And most of the time the school tax is done for a specific district, not county-wide. The oldest school tax in place is actually the Carborough Chapel Hill School District, done over 100 years ago, which was done when UNC Chapel Hill came in and wanted special schools for the professors and the students around the campus, right, for the elementary schools. The most recent one they're working on is Harnett County is trying to do a county-wide school district, and that is just now in discussion, so will probably be next year. The one odd thing about school tax is a supplemental tax. So the school tax would be in addition to what you're currently giving them. So you couldn't say, I'm replacing all school funding with a school tax. You would say, we'll fund the schools like we did last year, and we're going to give a supplemental school tax on top of that, which would create further confusion about how much money you're giving the schools, because, like with the fire tax, we showed a 1 cent fire tax, but we actually give them 3 times that. So it will create quite a bit of confusion by having a school tax and it's saying this will make the citizens aware how much money we're giving the schools. And it would make the citizens aware, if that was your goal, how much you raise the taxes for, but it still will not disclose the total funding going to schools. So the bottom line is, would take a motion from the school board asking the commissioners to put it up for a vote, then going out to the citizens for a vote. And then every year, the school board submitting a budget request and saying a supplemental tax, we recommend this rate, and this board deciding what the rate should be. Is that what you're focused on? Or some of the discussions seem to be about maybe changing the tax insert, the tax flyer, so that we could better show the citizens what we were giving the schools. I brought the last 10 years of the flyers with me. I only have one copy of the total document, so we could look at what we have given the citizens to see if there's improvement we could do there, or do you really want to focus on a school tax?
I think that was the original idea, just to provide clarity to the taxpayer as to exactly how much money goes to schools out of county money. And, excluding state funding, excluding the Article 43, what is it, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay, there are 2 of those. And all other line items, just simply the amount of money that goes from the county taxpayer to schools. And it's in the past been lumped all in one.
It's been tricky because all of our services have multiple revenue funds that contribute. So we're never able to make a clean apples to apples to say just general fund, just for schools. Public safety is the same way, they're getting funding from other places.
Again, that was the original thought, for clarity there, because there's a lot of misconceptions and confusions about how much money from Person County goes to schools. It's not real clear.
Well, if you look at the dollar that we used to do, it showed that DSS got, Human Services got more than the schools, which was inaccurate because it shows, that also shows the federal and the state dollars. If you just look at the local dollars that we put in DSS, it's just a little over $4 million. We put in a lot more into the schools that are directly from county and local tax dollars.
And that's exactly my point, to say that we don't separate the funding just to general fund for our other departments. So it's a little confusing, and I'm a little worried that people would think that we're giving schools so much in comparison when we start backing out general fund or other additional funds and just focus on general fund.
I think it's fine the way it is, and then if we even look at a school tax, this county hadn't even been able to get a quarter penny sales tax approved for schools, quality of life, and it was one other thing we put it on there for. So
Rick Senior saying.
Yeah, so I would doubt that someone would, the voters would approve a separate tax.
A separate tax would not help improve the demonstration of what you're giving to the schools. It would be the extra on top of everything else. So it may even cause more confusion. I'm passing around the copies of the tax insert we've done over the past years. We've always mentioned the percentage of money going to the different departments. If there's some suggestions about one you like better or what you'd like to add or take away from that, that's something we do late June. I usually have an intern student help us with that. Civil heads that project up, but that shows that what we've done in the last 10 or so years. Originally we had a half page, now we're at a full page of information, and we're always looking for good information to put in that flyer. So if you're just trying to get your message across, that may be the right avenue.
I'll look at it. All right.
So back to, does that answer all your questions about the schools? Do you have a preference for using the tax flyer, it sounds like, just to clarify that? Okay, we can do that. No problem. So back to quality of life programs. Do you all have any other items that you'd like to add? Again, this is a work session, so it's really very informal, and, you know, feel free to.
Since it is a work session, and that's what it's all about, we're here to look at, as you requested, a 5-year strategic plan. And I looked over some of those since our last meeting, and those 4 stated objectives there to me were vague, inconclusive, and needed a little different look through a different lens. And I actually put some things on paper, and I can pass those things around. I'm not saying that they are all right, but I would like this board to consider those items, and maybe a title change with some of them. At the top of your first page, you had objectives, and those were 4. I changed the title around a little bit because the language is important. The language would help us clarify what we're thinking, what our needs are, where we're going, and I thought that, simply put, as an example, improved school facilities did not address totally what our schools need, public schools as well as SPCC. And the note I jotted down there was, number 1, we changed that to an education improvement plan. And those are some things there that I did that. And of course, you can blame me for it, but I didn't ask anybody. Those are my thoughts. But embrace a plan to adequately fund public schools and community college. So I think Person County needs to embrace, in this case, education, that we haven't done a very good job of funding over the past several years. Historically, we haven't, and you can look at data there from the past, and these are some of the things that I just based my thoughts on. We've had flat funding in schools numerous years. We've had an actual reduction by 2% one year. Inflation has come in there at about 2% over the past probably 15 years roughly, so we aren't taking a look at those things. But again, those are my thoughts in looking at, and that was just the one example, but, and I did try to address some of that, like prioritize a plan. We need a plan to meet the ADA, number one in our schools. They need to be safe for all of our students at whichever and whatever schools. As Mr. Jeffers mentioned, we've got schools here that are 70 years old and their 40s technology. They're unsafe and from a lot of different perspectives. And so we need to look at that a little more in depth, dig in and drill down to see what those needs are. I'm taking into consideration too the effort put forward by the EDC Commission or board, and that was a very in-depth discussion that went on, and Mr. Newell and Ms. Short were in the room for long periods of time to come up with a recommendation from the EDC board that does address some of the needs of Person County. And so those are some of my thoughts there in changing those titles to make those more comprehensive, and the ability to look at and develop what we might call a long-term plan, because we're looking down the road 5 years. We don't have a crystal ball, but we need some sort of plan that that has the right language in it, rather than, I'll just use a word, develop. We've been developing county and school plans as long as I've been around, but it never comes to fruition. So we need to have something more with some teeth that carries a little weight, and again, embrace the needs of the county and respond accordingly. And it's hard. We're not a rich county. We're not an orange county. But we need to give our resources all the needed thought that it takes, whatever it takes, and have the backbone as a Board of Commissioners to lead the county beyond the next election cycle. And again, I think we need to pay some attention to that sort of stuff. Those are my ideas, so you can incorporate those into what you have, or vice versa. And
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to know if the Board of Education, this is a question that they would probably have to answer, have they ever looked into the possibility of year-round schools and what that would save them in facilities or time or other things that it would save them? I mean, I don't know, sometimes you have to get people attuned to the idea of that, but
It's not very popular.
We have discussed that. Well, they did when I was on that board. It was a topic of discussion, and the merits of doing that are very high. I watched 3 grandchildren go through year-round schools through middle schools, and it was very effective. I have a daughter-in-law that teaches in one of those schools. It really is a good thing. With the breaks that come every 9 weeks, it's good for the teachers, it's good for the students. But we met a lot of opposition in those discussions with parents here in the county. Now, I don't say that they shouldn't address it again, but it has been talked about.
what would it save? I mean, I know you got facilities, but would it save, could you do it with less facilities, or would you have to have more facilities? What?
I can ask Dr. Peterson to respond to that at some point, but we've not looked at that. It's a
Well,
school
with
board
that,
discussion,
Going on your
gentlemen.
list, your list going with B and C under number 1 already. Didn't we do that today with the capital improvement plan?
Well, yeah, and these are my thoughts as recent as yesterday, so, you know, I didn't know what this group was going to do. But, yeah, there's some things there that are, as you say, we just took care of, but again, to put some things on paper, have some timelines, have some responsible parties to report progress, and not just have something on paper, put on the shelf. We did that with the person's future, and everything that could be done on paper was done, and it was done well, most of which cost money, never had a second look. Just didn't happen. And we can't make progress that way. Things aren't the same as they were 10 years ago. Our children and their education is not. Our workforce demands are not. Farming is certainly not. And without, I think a farmer today needs broadband in their business as much as some other businesses will or does. So again, I think we need to, again, embrace the need for some genuine, strong discussion and input into where we're headed as a county, and not remain status quo, to just keep everything going along as it is. I don't know that anything actually remains status quo. If we take that approach, we're being regressive, we're not advancing. So these are, again, my individual thoughts.
I wanted to let you know too, for items 2 and 3, we talked about those quite a bit at the last meeting. And Sherry is working with the EDC group to kind of update those. So those will reflect, as Gordon's document requests, the EDC's plan. They just haven't been updated yet because she's still working on those. So the timing didn't work out for this meeting.
Well,
so.
As I said, this is a work session.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just putting it on the table.
Yep.
So I think we got 4 good objectives. I just only want to, we only need 1 or 2, maybe 3 items underneath that we know we can get done within the next 4 to 5 years. I mean, I like the wish list on having A through M and some of these, but realistically, this is not the only thing we're going to spend money on the next 4 years. I mean, nobody would have thought we were going to come in and see a compression study that costs $977,000 or 1.3. So that's, you know, some of these items are low money or low ticket type items, but we don't need more than 3 under each objective if we're really serious about getting them done. You know, we can put a wish list on here that looks good on paper, as you said, as Commissioner Powell said, but it's not tangible. So,
well, number one, they've got to be doable. I mean, you've got to be able to do it, and in this case, within the 5-year plan, and there may be 1 or 2 items that actually might need to go into a 10-year plan, especially with workforce needs.
Well, I think this list pretty much covers what we got to get, what we need to get done. Now, the question is how we're going to go about it.
Which list are we looking at now? The one I gave you, or the one that Sybil gave us?
Well, yours kind of condenses it to a better format, I think. But I think they're both saying basically the same thing.
Okay.
But the bottom line to all of these being realistic is how we're going to raise the money.
well,
And are we committed to raising the money?
At this point, I don't know that we're there.
you go to number 1 on Sybil's list. I mean, we've already hired a consultant. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And we're not going to do a school tax. I mean, I thought I heard earlier that the information was more clarified to the taxpayer what's being spent.
Yes.
So now you're just down to 1 under that, which is the big one. And that's probably the only thing that needs to stay under that, in my opinion, right now, because we're talking about the monies that we want to have to do it. I mean, I understand some of the things that Commissioner Powell has under his education improvement plan, but right now, like I said earlier, our biggest concern, I think, is getting these facilities up to par.
And I will note too, the deferred maintenance includes the ADA compliance.
Okay.
So that's the 30 million, you know, that includes a lot more than just improvements. It's other things as well.
And I would think Commissioner Powell's E would go under number 2.
What, the formulate plan for ATC on PCC?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think that would be better fitted maybe under number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that would be essentially the feasibility study that you all had approved. Yes.
Yeah, that's,
then my question for Civil C, to develop a subcommittee of the EDC with a regional workforce development focus.
That,
Huh?
oh, excuse me, go ahead.
How much of that has been done with that presentation that they gave us? Didn't they have some work sessions, and didn't they pretty much develop or come up with that plan that Mr. Reynolds presented to us?
Yes, and I know Sherry is working on that. Again, she'll be back before us to kind of present an update type these items 2 and 3. That's one of the things that she's working on in her plan.
The EDC group's meeting on the 23rd to update these strategic plan initiatives for you all.
A, under Civil's funded workforce development feasibility study, that's a pretty low cost.
Yes, and my
So,
understanding
I don't-
is that Sherry has funding in her budget for that.
So we're not looking for funding for that.
Well, I think it would have to be approved, or it is approved, I'm not
It's
sure.
it's for the upcoming fiscal
Upcoming,
year,
yes.
so the board would have to approve that in the proposed budget.
Okay. So 19, 20.
And of course, we wouldn't know, you know, until we got the feasibility study back, we wouldn't know what we were going to do. So that's why the item B there, you know, is a question mark, but it's something that you would begin the next fiscal year. The feasibility study would tell you the cost and the steps towards moving forward with that.
Some of these others I would refer, I guess, to our EDC to see if these are still priorities as far as the nonprofit, and it'd be up to us on this implement of the workforce feasibility study, but we got to have a study before we can say what we're going to implement.
Yes, that's correct. And they are working on that, so.
I think your idea on targeting 2 or 3 things and concentrating on them is something we're gonna have to do. Otherwise, we're gonna fragment ourselves to the point where nothing gets done.
So if we look at number 2, go back to number 2, the K-14 workforce development. Are any of those that you want to remove to kind of reduce that number to a smaller?
Well, it sounds like A is already in the works.
Yes, if you so desire. I mean, it's up to you all to
So,
approve the budget.
Yeah, so if we approve that in the budget, only thing should be on here is what we should plan to implement, hopefully, from what that study shows us. So you can take that one off, in my opinion.
B, okay. And then, of course, we have the feasibility study for PCC, so that's in the works.
And D would probably need our blessings, but it's nothing the county can do. That would be something that the EDC board would have to do, correct? We can't form a nonprofit.
Yes, that's right.
So take that
So
off.
take that one off, okay?
You said, on C, EDC is already doing that, you can take that one off too.
Yep.
Which one?
C?
Okay. So that leaves a pretty big ticket item, which is the implementation of the workforce feasibility study, which is, could be 1 or 2, 3 things that come out of that we could do.
And the PCC feasibility study. I have that one on there too, is that correct? I added that one.
I don't know, I'm looking at this one that was at our desk.
Right, and I've moved from Commissioner Powell's plan, the PCC feasibility study, to there. So you have those two, is that correct? Yes, E, I added.
Okay, yeah, with ATC. Okay, that gives us 2.
Okay.
What are the two, you said?
The first one, A, fund the workforce development feasibility study. And then B would be the feasibility study that you approved in your CIP today. And the rest of them would go off. And then once you get the feasibility studies back, you would then have subsequent action items.
I would take A, fund it off, because it's already,
Okay.
sounds like it's going to be in our proposed budget. And then, so the only thing should stay would be the implementation of the workforce feasibility study.
Okay.
And Commissioner Powell's Advanced Technology Center is E, formulate a plan for ATC or PCC or alternate properties. So that gives us 2 under that.
Okay, correct. And that's the feasibility study from the CIP. Okay. Yep. And number 3, again, Sherry is working with her team to come back and provide, information under this one. So if there's not enough, if you need more information, that's coming, or if you're comfortable, choosing 2 from that list, then.
So on number 3, number C, contribute annually to the water and sewer fund. If that's something that we're in agreement to, wouldn't that just be direction to the manager to put in her proposed budget each year instead of an actual strategic plan item?
Yes.
Well, it's already a water sewer fund, we just need to decide to fund it.
Right. So if that's a consensus amongst us, she just knows to bring that in her proposed budget. We don't need that as a item, as a strategic plan.
No, that ought to be implemented and kept.
Is that something you'd like to see in your upcoming budget?
Yes.
So we'll take that off the plan.
And what was expressed to us at a retreat, out of number 3, I would say D probably had the most significance
Okay.
from what was stated to us at our retreat.
Okay. This is
The new land use.
the land use plan. Mhm.
Yes.
This is a little bit. Yes, this has some economic development. This is the economic development piece that will go into the land use plan. Yes, and that is. That will be recommended in your budget as well. Okay? So I'd like to keep D. Any thoughts on the other ones? Or items from Commissioner Powell's list?
I think on Commissioner Powell's list, and I want to commend him for putting a lot of thought into it. Of course, the VFDs, that's still an ongoing effort with them and with collaboration with TDA and Chamber Museum. I mean, I can say from the museum part, Sybil, you can speak to that they have been really.
We're not on that one yet, Kyle. We're on Gordon's number 3, incorporate 5-year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And our expand industrial site inventory.
Okay, well, I hope my comments are for then.
What does this ESA stand for?
That is a environmental study, and Sherry mentioned it at our last work session. That's for.
Is that a? I know it says phase 1, but that just requires a funding allotment.
I believe so, yes. And the consultant comes and does an analysis of the
So we'll
parcel.
pull that out, just look at it as a budget item, not necessarily a strategic plan item.
Ray,
I'm looking at Gordon's list, but I'm looking at Gordon's list almost, if we pull 1 or 2 off of your list, his are the bullet points under these 2. I mean, of things that we could actually see,
Okay,
to accomplish that.
sure, okay. We can merge them.
Mr. Fashy, in light of last week's airport meeting, would you say that conduct phase 1 ESA on county-owned land adjacent to the airport, could we eliminate that? Based,
No, this is a different project. This is related to that former concrete plant.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Strike all
Yeah,
of that.
asphalt, I'm sorry.
Okay, strike all of that then.
Item A under 3, I believe that's something that Sherry has in her requested budget as well, but that would lead to some additional action items based on what that comes back with.
So maybe we need to word that like we did above one,
Mhm.
begin implementation
Yes.
of economic development opportunities, or however you want to word that.
Okay,
That gives us 2 under 3.
right. And that leaves us with number 4, the quality of life programming. And again, I just tried to get a list together so you all can react to it. And of course, Commissioner Powell's got some items on
Yeah,
his.
we're back to what Kyle
Yes.
comments.
The museum.
Oh, I was just stating that with the museum and chamber and the TDA, I think the collaboration there, that's a given. I know that the museum has done an excellent job of promoting itself and ongoing efforts along with the chamber and TDA, so I think that that's one of Mr. Powell's statements, that that's just a matter of getting, good people on those boards to do that. And I think we're on track with that.
Okay.
So we look at Sybil's list. First thing pops out is the dog park. I would strike that.
Okay.
We've had a lot of calls about dog parks, but once we tell people that all the parks allow dogs besides Sainsbury, they seem to be okay,
Okay.
you know. I would strike skate and bike park. We talked about that in the past. Ropes course, that probably go good down in Mayo, but I don't know. I won't put a full X across it right now. I'll put it just slash.
Question mark.
Going back to Gordon's list, Boys and Girls Clubs or YMCA. I almost prefer if we're gonna go after one, we go after one, not both, because a lot of them have competing programs, and we don't, in some of these programming, we're kind of offering already maybe in Parks and Rec. So we want to make sure we're working, if we go after a group like this, we want to make sure they're somewhat some collaboration with what we're doing. That way we're not competing or repeating services. And there's some things they want to be able to do better than us, and if that's the case, then yep, we let private do it and we don't do it. But.
Well, I jotted both down because I've had questions about both.
Yeah.
Of course, from different people, but the subcommittee on Boys and Girls Club is already there.
But I go back to that meeting we were at. There were a lot of people on that committee that are very busy people. And the first thing they told to the coordinator of that meeting was, we don't want to be meeting 2-3 years and not see anything done. Don't waste our time. If this is not something that we really see happening, then it's wasting my time to come to these meetings. And we hadn't had a meeting since.
Yes.
So I will say about the YMCA is that whatever year Chairman Newell and I went and met with the Danville Y, and their board actually took a vote at that time that they would include us in their district. We're kind of in a no man's land. If you call YMCA, we're not really in the Raleigh's district. We're not in Durham. There's one in South Boston. We were kind of in no man's land. So they actually had to get approval from the national, state, whoever Y to include us, but they actually took a vote by their board with interest of coming to Person County. So much that I met 3 of their people and drove them around in my vehicle and showed them different sites that we had previously looked at for recreation type centers. And so there was a lot of interest there. We just didn't have the votes at that time. So I would say we're a little further along if I will obviously want a commitment from this board before we go back and approach them again. But I think we're a little further along with them being willing to do something. And at that time, they were just talking about something like the county would build a building and rent it to them for a year. They paid the staff, they did the programming, all of it. I mean, you know.
In my conversations with them, they needed a commitment from this board to fund a feasibility study.
About
to
20, 25?
I think it was around 30, if I recall, but I'll go back. Yeah, and that would determine whether or not a facility could be sustained here and was feasible, and the board was not willing to commit to the study, so we dropped it.
So if you ask me for 3 out of this list, that will be one of them.
Okay.
Fund that feasibility study and,
okay.
And, you know, start the conversations again at the appropriate time,
Okay.
if you ask me.
I agree with that. Now, what they primarily wanted to do was see if the community would support it.
Right.
And if it would, then they would run it for us if we built it.
And what services the community would support.
Yeah.
So they will look at, does the county really need a pool, or does the county really need this or that? I mean, you know, that was all part of that study.
But if it proved that it would support itself, the fact that they would run the day-to-day operations makes it a whole lot more feasible than if we try to tackle it by ourselves.
And this,
Because those people know how to build them, they know how to run them.
this type of partnership is already happening in our state. The Hampton Roads, Virginia Y covers an area in North Carolina down in Currituck County. And they built the facility, the county built the facility, and they house senior center, Parks and Rec, Y, and then their local hospital has like some type of a facility within it, some type of rehab type partnership.
Okay.
So we've seen it work in other areas.
Okay. It's at Currituck, right? Okay.
I have their contract
Okay.
of how they formulated it.
Okay. So I have a check by the YMCA, the VFDs, after school, with the caveat that there needs to be some discussion about who is the best entity to take that on. And then the collaborating with our partners, TDA, museum, chamber, et cetera.
Sounds like Kyle said
And
that's
that's
pretty
it.
much already being done.
Or you said, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
yeah, I'm
You're saying
that's-
scratch it, okay.
Well, I'm just saying I think we're in good harmony
Okay.
with that right now.
So we can take that off, excuse me, I misunderstood that.
And just continue the efforts that we're doing
Okay.
now.
So then, after-school program with some discussion around it, lowering ICER ratings and a YMCA. And those are the 3 I have there.
YMCA, VFD, and what was your third?
After-school programming with some discussion around how could that work and who would be the best entity to manage that
Right,
and
'cause that
not
could be-
duplicate.
That could be done through the Y possibly, or, the Boys and Girls Club, that time was talking about it. I guess this here on your list was listed like who, Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Well, I know that John Hill obviously has had a program in the past, and he offered to share information with me about that. This is from this cost amount is from the Boys and Girls Club. The last time I spoke with Tanya Evans, who's in charge of that effort, she said they were meeting with there's at least one other existing after-school program to make sure they weren't duplicating services. So that's what's happening with that group now. But their biggest barrier, once they work through some of these issues, is it's $150,000 a year to run an after-school program. So
What would that consist of?
I can get more information for you, but it would be a Boys and Girls Club, and it would be primarily for elementary and middle school kids, and it would be initially have at least, one location at an existing school. There are others examples of those types of programs that have their own freestanding location. For example, in Granville County, that's what they have. But initially, it would be at a middle school or at an elementary school. And the
You had to form a
$150,000.
board, you had to raise so much money prior to.
Yes, you have to raise the $150,000. And they do have a board, as Commissioner Jeffers mentioned, that's really wants, citizens who really want to have this and are interested in helping, with the fundraising, but there were an existing program that they wanted to make sure they weren't, duplicating any services with, so. Is there consensus for those three, to focus on those three?
Are we doing anything with A on your list about litter collection? I don't know exactly what you mean in that.
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that our environmental committee meeting, so the city has already given their clean sweep date. I think the Allisville Fire Department is doing one actually on the same day. And so the environmental committee is looking at the committee picking a county road to do that day, or pick another day as well.
Okay.
But I thought maybe that's something that just could be annually, or, unless you were talking about something a little more. When we talked about litter in the environmental committee meeting, we had DOT come, we had the police department come, we had the sheriff department come. The biggest thing that concern that I remember hearing about with DOT is a lot of people adopt roads, but there's not a lot of people that are enforcing their quarterly pickup. If you adopt a road, you're supposed to have pickup on that road at least 4 times a year. And I don't know if that's you go to the state, or how do you enforce that, or how do you get the word out that these people who adopt these roads should be doing quarterly pickup. You just go by there, they give you the bags and the vest and the gloves, and
Yeah. Well, the item on here is really for us to research options this coming fiscal year. So it would just be looking into things Commissioner Jeffers just mentioned, following up with the state, seeing if there's some sort of coordinated thing that we could do, and hope to implement something in '21.
So you might can get in touch with Jason Torian, who's our chair, and he probably can give you some of the minutes or the stuff that we've already done, because we've been talking about that for the better part of a year.
It's a horrible problem, not only, well, it's nationwide, I guess we would say. It's a problem that we have, but in Person County, it seems to me it's worse. I know.
We may be working on something else that could help with that, through a contractual level, if we can get it done.
Right, so we need to look at it
Okay.
very seriously.
I would like, this is not really giving off this, but it leads into something that I was thinking about with Gordon. What are the rules for using county inmates to do work? Like, you don't see the state people much anymore. Someone told me, oh, they changed the law, they can't use them as much. Like, you used to see the people from the Yanceyville facility over there. What are the rules for county inmates?
Okay.
If we were to use them, like to pick up trash or to mow or anything, I mean, what?
Okay.
Find out what the rules are.
I know that Rockingham County had an email out on the listserv saying that that's what they do for their litter pickup program, is they use county.
Yeah, I just wondered what's the,
It's
just have to be approved by the sheriff? Is it,
Okay.
I mean, what's
Yeah,
the
I'll look into
process
that. Okay.
to get something like that rolling? And then,
Probably more supervisors.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want,
Staff.
basically, I want to know, can they be used? That's what I want to know.
Okay.
I mean, 'cause
I think you can.
you don't see them like you used to.
Okay.
As far as community service now, we have a lot of people that, especially when I worked at Parks and Rec, a lot of community service people did a lot of mowing down in Mayo. I mean, we utilize them quite a bit.
I think John still works with many of them.
Sure he does.
Those folks.
The reason the state stopped doing part of that was the legislature decided it was too costly. They were sending guards out and portable toilets out and doing all.
Insurance.
They decided, they were looking at it, at least that was their reason for not doing it. And whether they were right or wrong, I'm sure that it cost a lot. If you hear, I heard a report last week from a district guy about how much it cost them now, the state DOT, to do it. So, you know, you just shift, they didn't really save any money doing that. They just shifted the cost from the prison department to the Department of Transportation. That's all they really did. I think they may have been trying to, and maybe it looked good on paper, but.
If you see them, a lot of them are contract people, like the state just
At least
contracted.
you gave somebody else over there that wasn't doing nothing, maybe it gave some incentive to do something. I mean, they got, probably most of them are low priority type crimes and weren't real violent stuff, but they were in there for different things, and it gave them something to do. Maybe it gave them some incentive to do something when they got out, but anyway, they did away with it, so.
The only thing I would look at about the after-school program is, I mean, I don't know, that almost needs to, it depends on what they're going after. Now, when I ran it, it was strictly, half of our kids in elementary school were at the level to be obese or already obese, so it was more of a physical activity type program, so it was a partnership between Cooperative Extension, Parks and Rec, and Health Department. We don't want Parks and Rec doing homework. I mean, you know, make sure whatever we're going after with the after-school program, that the right people are involved.
Right.
So I don't know if what the direction is for that. I mean,
Okay. I'll speak with John further about that.
I got a question for the attorney. I heard on the radio a couple of weeks ago that a local county, not necessarily, I don't know if it's in North Carolina or not, a local county imposed a $1,000 litter tax for people that were caught throwing trash out. Is that something that is allowed in North Carolina?
I do not believe we could do that because there's a doctrine of preemption. When the state has a law that's applicable statewide, the fact that that state law keeps counties and cities from having theirs. You want me to look into it deeper out there, I do not believe the county can impose tax.
It might be a fine, but like a...
what the Sheriff and Police Department told the Environment Committee was that their issue with that is they have to actually see you throwing it out.
That's right.
And then they'll show up at court and tell the judge they saw you throwing it out. The problem is if I call and say I saw Sybil throw some trash out, and they tell me I got to be at court at Tuesday to say I did it, and I've got to go to work, that most of the time that stuff doesn't pan out.
Yeah.
That has been a perennial enforcement program. We for a while had, maybe if it had Ray Jeffers on the return address, that we could charge him. There are all kinds of evidence problems we get.
Okay. Are there consensus under quality of life programs to focus on litter researching, litter control programs, after-school programming, lowering the ISO ratings, and YMCA feasibility study?
You said 4 things, I only got 3.
Oh, I added the litter collection, because it seemed like you all wanted me to look into that further.
I think we're going to address that in a different direction.
You might want to check with the solid waste section on some of that litter. You know, they changed a lot of that, but years ago, and they stopped them from doing it. Don't ask me exactly why they stopped that, but when I first went to work with the health department, before some of them in here were born, we had a litter law in Durham County, and we would get the information like he's talking about a while ago, and send you a notice with your name and address on it that we found it out there. And sometimes you didn't get any results. But I know one family in the Durham-Orange County line that the kid that threw the trash out was supposed to carry it to a dumpster, and he threw it out, and Mama got the notice. So he spent his summer cleaning up the dump down there that was about as big as this room. So, you know, sometimes it did some good, and I'm sure he got a real good education that summer. But she told me that his pay was going to be getting it up. So, you know, they've changed a lot of stuff on it, and it's got to be worse, a much worse problem than it used to be.
Thank you.
Solid waste might have something to that we don't realize.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't have anything for chairman's report. How you got anything? Anybody, any commissioners got anything they want to bring up?
I mentioned that clean sweep, I was just going to mention that.
Okay. All right, we'll take a 15-minute recess. We'll meet back in the room upstairs for a closed session.
Would you like to stay down here?
Is it possible to stay down here for the closed
Yeah, we
session?
have very few people, so I think we can manage to do it.
Yeah, we were just doing it to have more privacy, but that'd be fine.
Okay.
15-minute break?
So where would we be?
Right here.
We'll stay here. We'll stay
That's
put.
fine. I mean, I don't care as long as I know.